Thank you so much. So as you heard, I'm going to talk about the economics of proof of useful work. But before we talk about proof of useful work, let's just briefly summarize Bitcoin and how normal proof of work works. So as you know, to achieve consensus in an open system, we need to have a way to kind of enforce people not being able to double vote. Right? In order to achieve consensus, we need these replicas to vote on what the correct content is. And if the system is completely open, people can just double vote. And it's impossible to get security. So the brilliant idea in Bitcoin and in Nakamoto's consensus protocol was to require all entities that want to vote to perform this proof of work. So proof of work is some computational puzzle we're solving. And every time we solve this computational puzzle, we get a vote. Okay? So this is a way to limit the amounts of votes an attacker can do by the computational power the attacker has. And now the security system relies on the fact that an attacker that controls less than 50% of the computational power in the network will be able to get less than 50% of the votes and therefore not be able to break security. Now, this needs to be formalized, and it can be formalized if you design the right type of system, which indeed Nakamoto did. Now, we get to the question of if security relies on the fact that people need to perform this expensive computation, why would people do it? Right? Why would honest people perform this expensive computation? And that's the second brilliant idea in Bitcoin, and it's that we incentivize them to do it by paying people to do this computation. So every time you solve this puzzle, not only you get a vote, but you also get a certain number of Bitcoins. At the moment, roughly 3 Bitcoins, and this is referred to as the block reward. So I'm going to call this number R, the number of Bitcoins you get, and then there's a price of Bitcoin, which is P. Okay, so every time, roughly every 10 minutes, we solve this puzzle, and we have this reward P times R that is being given to the miner that solves the puzzle. Now, one important thing to note here is that for this to make sense economically, the block reward needs to be at least as high as the cost of mining, because otherwise nobody wants to do it. Okay? And this leads to an economic notion of security for Bitcoin, which means that if you want to control 50% of the network, you need to spend PR over 2 in order to break the network. Okay? And that's the economic security of the system. Okay? So you need to waste computation worth P times PR divided by 2 to break the security of Bitcoin. So to summarize, mining requires massive useless work, but this useless work is also what gives you security. In fact, in order to break the security protocol, you need to spend the same amount of useless work and useless resources and therefore money. Okay, make sense? Great. So that's amazing because they give us security, but it's also pretty horrible. It's a wasted resource. We're just wasting computation in order to get security. And a natural question is there a way that one can, instead of doing this useless work, do something useful at the same time? And indeed, in today's world, there is a lot of computation taking place. Right? As we all know, AI workloads are massive computations taking place. GPUs are running out. And so there is this massive computation already taking place in the world. Could we maybe make use of that computation to also do the proof of work? That would be great. And that's an idea that's referred to as proof of useful work. It goes back to almost the beginning of Bitcoin. Early on, there was this thing called prime coin, where instead of just doing useless mining, one would try to do something that's slightly less useless, but not really that useful. Today, really the only useful thing there is the AI LLM computations. And what are those LLM computations? These are just massive matrix multiplications. And indeed, for a long time, it was believed that one couldn't maybe do useful proof of work for something that's truly useful. There was a recent breakthrough last year by Komagotsky and Weinstein that actually showed how to get a proof of useful work for exactly matrix multiplication, the exact operation that we need in order to do these LLM workloads. So now there is this proof of useful work, and they have since, this protocol is called the Pearl GEM protocol. GEM stands for General Matrix Multiplication. And there's now 3 months ago, they launched this blockchain. It's up and running based on this proof of useful work. Okay, so it's out there now running. Now, we get to the economic question. And this is an issue that's been around, actually, even already from the beginning when people introduced this notion of proof of useful work. It's great if it can be done. We don't know how to do it. But even if we could do it, maybe it's actually a bad idea. Okay? And maybe Bitcoin security relies on the fact that the computation is useless. Because the whole argument I gave you was, in order to break security, you need to spend a lot of resources. Okay? And for you to spend these resources, this computation needs to be useless. Because if it's useful, you're not actually spending something. So let me actually go over this kind of folklore argument that's been around. It's sometimes called the proof of useful work dilemma. But in essence says that any proof of useful work scheme cannot be secure. Okay? So recall in Bitcoin, we have this attacker that wants to break the network. He needs to spend waste a lot of computation in order to get 50% of the network. So it's high cost. Now, if you instead have this run a proof of useful work scheme, then attacker, he spends the same amount of computation. But if this proof of useful work is actually fully useful, okay, there's no overhead, I can reuse it to do something else useful. In that case, I'm using that in order to serve AI workloads. But I'm getting paid for that. So the computation I'm spending, I'm also getting paid for. I'm selling it. Therefore, the cost of doing this attack is 0. Sounds rock solid, right? And indeed, that's was the classic argument in literature why this really shouldn't be able to work. So we're going to argue that this is in fact wrong, this argument. And to do that, I'm going to need to provide an economic model, but let me start by giving an outline of why it's wrong. And I'm going to start by giving you one of my favorite examples from cryptography that I've used a lot, but it goes back to, this is kind of the classic chess master problem that many of you have probably heard of. Let's say I'm going to play chess against a chess master. I play one in the morning, I'm going to lose. I'm not that good at chess. In the evening, I play another guy, I also lose. Okay? But if I play both of them at the same time, I can do something unexpected. I take the moves of this guy, and I do it on this board. When this guy moves, I do it on that board. I get these guys to play against each other. Okay? And suddenly, I'm able to do something I couldn't have done when running these things in isolation. So what does this tell us? That whenever you're running 2 markets at the same time, if you're actually coordinating between the 2 markets, unexpected things can happen. And in fact, that's going to be the resolution to this paradox also. Okay? And in fact, that's why this strawman argument is flawed. Consider this attacker now that I said that he's doing this computation and selling the output. Yes, he's making use of that other chess game. But we're not considering what's happening here. People that are providing AI workloads shouldn't just do that either. They should also make use of the stuff that they're getting in. So when you're providing AI workloads, you should also be mining Perl. And once you do that, you're getting paid in tokens. What will that mean? That in a free market, the price of AI workloads will decrease. By how much? By exactly the amount of tokens you're receiving. So effectively, whenever this guy now is selling this workload, workloads he has produced, he's actually not getting the full price of that computation. He's getting the price minus a discount, which is minus the token price. That means that when he sells it, he does get some money, but he doesn't get the full price. He needs to still pay the discount. And that discount cost turns out to be exactly the original cost of mining. Okay? So that's on a high level, the idea why this strawman argument actually is flawed. Basically, the market is adjusting, and you're not selling it for the full market price, but instead you're getting less back. Okay? And it turns out that we can prove that the price of attack will be exactly the block reward divided by 2, exactly as in Bitcoin. So to summarize, AI providers now get tokens for the AI computations, and that means that they will eventually, market will adjust, and they will actually get lower the AI prices. So in a free market, the prices go down, and therefore attacker still needs to pay. Now, in this paper, what we do is we provide like a full economic model of proof of use of work in order to formalize this argument. So that's the first thing we do. And then we provide a complete characterization of equilibria, what they look like in this market. So the market, in essence, allows agents to do three things. They can either just mine Bitcoin, or they can just do AI workloads, or they can do this duplex operation. Okay? So the duplex operation means I'm doing both at the same time. I'm doing this proof of useful work that is both mining and doing AI workloads at the same time. So I'm going to refer to the mining as M, the AI workloads as L for learning, and the duplex for D. Okay? The paper also contains a social welfare analysis. I won't have time to talk about that. But as we'll see, some pretty crazy and intriguing things will happen economically once you have this proof of useful work. So it won't just be about security, but it's actually going to have an effect on the AI market itself. And I think that's really what makes this so intriguing. OK, so actually, this clock is stopped here, so I don't know how much time I have. But OK, I have 10 minutes. OK. So let's recall how the standard proof world looks like. Okay, Bitcoin today. So we have two computation markets taking place. One is the Bitcoin market where people are mining, solo mining M. Okay? And we also have the AI market, right? The AI computation taking place, solo learning, I call it L. Okay? Each of these computation operations have some cost. I'm going to refer to that cost as E. Let E stand for how much it costs to run one GPU for 10 minutes. Okay? 10 minutes is the block time of Bitcoin. Now, these two markets are two separate markets that are well understood how to analyze. Okay? The Bitcoin market is something economically called a taluk market. Okay? And a taluk market is just a pie or cake cutting market. We have every 10 minutes a fixed block reward, P times R, that's being released. And the way this block reward is released to the population is based on how many people are participating. So to participate, I need to perform one GPU. That costs me E. And based on how many people are coming, we cut this pie into that many pieces. So let S be the amount of computation taking place. So each person now gets PR divided by S minus E, in which has to pay. Okay? And it's easy to see that the only equilibrium in this thing is that PR divided by S equals E. Okay, so this tells you, if you know the cost of computation, you know how many people are participating, it tells you exactly what the price is. Very easy to deal with. Okay? On the right, we have the inference market. Okay, the LLM inference market. And that way that is typically specified is you have a demand curve. A demand curve that says if the price of AI compute is P, how many people are going to do this need AI? Okay? So this demand curve is specified externally. And now we can see that an AI provider that sets a price P, he is going to get as utility P minus E. He gets P, paid for inference, and he pays E. And in a free market, he's going to eventually set his price to be E, the marginal cost E. And in that case, we know exactly how much participation will be there. It's going to be D of E. Now, I'm going to assume this demand curve for this presentation. This demand curve is something called elastic. Elastic means that once you lower the price, so once the price lowers, the demand goes up. But not only demand goes up, but also the total size of the market will actually go up. So P times D of E increases as P decreases. This is sometimes referred to as the Jevons effect. The more you lower the price, not only you get more demand, but actually the size of the market increases. Okay? The paper we consider also the inelastic case, but this is the case that's the most realistic in practice. We believe that this is to be the case. Okay, so the standard world then, standard proof work, you have this solo mining and solo learning. Think of solo mining as a fork that allows you to dig for coins, and learning as a spoon that allows you to scoop AI workloads. And now, if we introduce proof of useful work, it's adding this extra operation D. Okay? This D is like a spork. Okay? This spork allows you to take some soup and dig at the same time. Okay? Now, of course, the spork isn't perfect. It's not as good as a spoon. It's not as good as a fork. So it has some overheads. Okay? So it does both. It does 2 for 1, but not exactly 2 for 1. It doesn't able to do both at exactly. So what are these overheads? So it's actually nice to look at what this original matrix multiplication protocol by Komorgodski and Weinstein does. So we can't just do plain matrix multiplication. We have to somehow randomize these matrices, because otherwise an attacker will be able to choose matrices that are easy to multiply. So what they do is, in fact, they use this hash function to add some extra noise to the matrices, and then you multiply the matrices with the noise. Now, that gives you the final result, but with noise. So then you have to peel away this noise. So if you select this noise in a clever way, this can be done with not too much overhead, but there is some overhead, right? So you do a little bit of extra work. So alpha, I'm going to refer to that overhead as how much overhead there is with respect to just doing matrix multiplication. And there is another overhead, gamma, which is the overhead to if you were just wanted to do mining. Okay? If you don't care about using real workloads, you can put in matrices A and B to be 0. And that also helps you a little bit. It makes it a little bit faster. So there are these two inefficiencies. The spork isn't perfect. OK, so this spork, the duplex, will now produce 1 over alpha of a learning operation and 1 over gamma of a mining operation. So if you think of alpha and gamma to be like 30% overhead, that means that you're getting 0.8 of a mining operation, 0.8 of a learning operation. So you're getting 1.6 for 1. And we're going to refer to this protocol having non-trivial efficiency if 1 over alpha plus 1 over delta is more than 1. You're getting more than 1 for 1. You're getting 1.1 or 1, ideally 2 for 1. So now you're going to set up these two markets and not just analyze them in isolation. Like classically, when you have two markets, you typically analyze one, then the other, and then you get into this classical paradox. But now what we're going to do is to analyze this whole, set up the whole market, consider all of this together. I won't really have time to it, but the market equation equilibriums are very easy. Okay, you just set up how much money people are getting. So the operation of the fork is as before, this one as before, and now you have this duplex that's going to give you 0.6 of this, or 0.8 of this, plus 0.8 of that. Okay? And now you set up a competitive equilibrium, and now you try to analyze it and see what happens when you do this. And typically, these things are pretty messy. So I refer to this as a conjoint production market. You have two markets, but now you have this extra action that is able to produce things in two markets at the same time. So this is a general concept that might be interesting outside of blockchains, right? What happens if you can produce things at two markets at the same time? For these particular two markets, of a Bertrand market there on the right and a Tulloch market on the left, turns out that you can actually provide a closed-form solution, and it's actually very simple and elegant. Okay? And so that's the main characterization of the paper. It shows actually there is a one-dimensional characterization of equilibria. The only thing you need to tell me is this parameter theta. Okay? And if you tell me theta, I'll tell you exactly, it fixes exactly the equilibrium, uniquely. Okay? So what is theta? Theta is just the ratio between the size of the token market and the size of the AI market. So think about how much money is being spent on mining in 10 minutes and how much money is spent on AI in 10 minutes. Okay? And divide the two, and that's theta. Okay, so tell me what the size of the relative ratio between the two markets is. In the paper, I argue that under standard macro theoretic assumptions, theta should be a behavioral constant. Okay, if you assume constant velocity, then this should be a behavioral constant. So think of it as being roughly like 20%, let's say. Okay, Bitcoin is 20% of the whole AI market. Once you tell me that, there exists a unique equilibrium, and there's a one-to-one mapping. Okay, so that's the main theorem. Theta and the equilibrium correspond one-to-one. So instead of showing you exactly what it is, let me illustrate it through this picture. In fact, we're going to end up in 3 different worlds based on what theta is. Okay? What theta and efficiency, how much overhead is. Okay? So if the overhead is big, trivial, in that case, we end up in what I refer to as Bitcoinia. Bitcoinia is just a classic Bitcoin world. Here we have people doing Bitcoin mining, completely useless, and here we have people doing AI work. Nobody's doing duplex work, okay? So that's the world Bitcoin lives in today. Now, once the efficiency becomes better, if the overhead of the computation proof of work is smaller, we enter what I refer to as Fortetia. So what is Fortetia? Fortetia is a world where people stop doing pure mining. Nobody does pure mining. Instead, people that previously were doing pure mining now start using duplex. And then we have people doing AI workloads, okay, separately. Now, the blue here is how many people are doing pure mining, or doing duplex, and green is how many people are doing AI workloads. Now, remember, there is still some overhead. So the light blue part here is the duplex part, the overhead part of it. So this is still, the blue part here is still wasted computation. But the interesting thing here we see here is that AI workloads are now subsidizing mining. So that means that many more people are mining. Okay? And in particular, that means that the amount of compute you need to do in order to break the system is much bigger. So it's growing like this, okay? So for the same theta, for the same TI ratio, token inference ratio, we now get a lot more security in the sense that the amount of compute you need to do is much bigger than before, okay? But it's still not changing anything economically. That's why I call it Fortetia. Security is fortified, but otherwise it's kind of economically similar to what before. But we're wasting less computation on security than in Bitcoin. Bitcoin, 100% security is wasted. Here, the fraction is much smaller. Okay? The most interesting happens when the overhead is sufficiently small and we enter what I call duplexia. So when the overhead is very small, then suddenly everybody, all AI workloads should be served using duplex also. Okay? And then the intriguing thing that happens is AI workloads now become cheaper. So the tokens are subsidizing the AI, the AI workloads. That makes the AI market size bigger. Okay, 1 minute, okay. That makes the AI size market bigger, so we're getting more AI being served, but not only more AI being served, but what's interesting is that, in fact, the value of the AI load being served grows even more, okay? So to summarize here, number one, we show that proof of useful work does not make security actually worse. In fact, it turns out that if you look at this previous graph, the security is going to be higher than with Bitcoin under good conditions. Furthermore, under these good conditions, if you have a proof of useful work with sufficiently small overhead and a sufficiently high token inference ratio, so that you have a high market penetration, what happens is that the tokens are subsidizing the price of AI. That in turn makes the market grow. And if you assume that this TI ratio is fixed, that in turn makes the token even more valuable, and you get into this cycle that just self-enforcing cycle. So in essence, now a good proof of work blockchain does something bizarre. It not only gives you this blockchain, but in fact, it behaves like this crazy instrument that allows more useful inference taking place in the world. So we're creating more social valuable computation taking place in the world. Now that seems bizarre. Like, how can it be that we add this blockchain and suddenly we're subsidizing AI workloads and making the AI market bigger, right? Somebody needs to pay for it, right? We know that there are no free lunches. And indeed, the people that pay for it, or the money is coming from what's referred to as a seigniorage, or inflation. That's not a new concept, right? Inflation or seigniorage is something that the US government does also to subsidize various different things. And we already do it in Bitcoin, right? In Bitcoin, we also have this inflation and seigniorage. But in Bitcoin, that seigniorage is only used for one thing. It's to pay for the wasted computation. Here, what happens is that the seigniorage is used to pay for AI workloads instead. So the inflation is subsidizing AI workloads instead of just paying for wasted computation. So in essence, proof of useful work becomes a financing vehicle for AI workloads. And as such, if you believe this model, what that means is that AI providers are actually incentivized to promote token adoption and better technologies. Because the better technology is and the higher token adoption you have, the more discount you get on AI and the bigger the AI market becomes. So in total, actually, adding proof of useful work to a blockchain leads to more social useful AI computations. And that's it. Thank you.
Yeah, very entertaining talk. Maybe we have time for one quick question.
Really exciting that we're moving to useful work, but I have a little concern about the quantum effect on if you're choosing something like AI, which can be done by quantum computers more efficiently than by classical, that you could actually accidentally lead to hyper-centralization and then just one malicious quantum computer entering the ecosystem could just upset the whole security of the infrastructure.
So this question maybe deserves a longer answer offline, but quantum computations, we don't have them yet. Furthermore, it's not clear how much they're going to actually affect AI workloads. It's a very different type of computation. And centralization, look, Bitcoin is pretty centralized also, so it's not actually, yeah. There's no clear answer to that.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Maybe we can have one last question.
So we have a long history of mining oil, and we used to flare the natural gas, but now we turn it into liquefied natural gas and sell it into a second market. Is this math any different than other places where things that used to be byproducts become additional markets for the goods?
Sorry, I didn't quite understand. Can you repeat?
We've seen other examples where things that used to be byproducts became goods. We used to just flare the natural gas. Now we sell the natural gas when we mine for oil, and it becomes cheaper to have oil and cheaper to have natural gas because they subsidize each other. I'm wondering if this is identical math or there's something different here than any other.
So I'm actually not aware of any analysis of these conjoint production markets. I think it is something one could actually apply also to classic oil markets and so on. And so here, actually, the math turned out to become different exactly because the Bitcoin market is a talk market. Oil markets don't behave that way, right? So this is actually what enabled. It was kind of magical that typically considering these two markets run at the same time is very, very messy to analyze. So here it's something bizarre that happened. It made it very, very clean to analyze it and get this closed form solution.
Thank you.
Yeah, let's thank Rafael again.